the fitter cardiovascularly someone is, then the more they can move, or the more work they can do relative to like their internal response. So you can kind of think of it similar to like how your car runs. People will often, when they're buying a new car, will look at fuel efficiency. So the further it can go for the fuel that you're burning, it's kind of the same basic idea. The more you can do for the amount of fuel that you're burning, or burning less for the same amount of work.
Welcome back to my podcast called Science and Sports. I'm your host, Simon, as usual. And today I'm joined by Graham Stark. Hi, Graham.
Hello, I'm nice to join you.
Thank you very much for coming on the show today. We talked a little bit before we started the episode. You are currently working for Firstbeat. You had your 9-year anniversary, so congratulations to that. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about some interesting stuff regarding Firstbeat, and also a little bit more about some deeper sports scientific knowledge that you can share. Before we start, is it possible for you to give me a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. So as you've mentioned already, now work for Firstbeat as a sports scientist. Been there for 9 years, as of last week. So time flies when you're having fun. Prior to that, worked in Premier League football in the UK. So worked at a couple of different clubs. So I was at Aston Villa for just under 2 years, and then Norwich City in various capacities for 5 or 6 years, I think it was. I can't remember now. Kind of worked my way from the women's team to the under-18s, and then into the senior team in the Premier League. So kind of seems a lifetime ago now that I was kind of in that club-based role, but it taught me a lot, and kind of still kind of provides a lot that I can take into the job with Firstbeat now.
Mm-hmm. You as a soccer guy, are you also interested in ice hockey?
I watch it a little bit here and there, so I've been watching some of the Olympics. And we obviously have a lot of ice hockey customers, so you kind of have to keep a familiarity with it and sort of keep up with what's going on a little bit. But yeah, it's not one we have too much exposure to here in the UK.
Obviously, as a hockey person, I need to bring you a little bit away from soccer towards hockey, but maybe we'll get there one day.
Yeah. Well,
I told you
it's my professional background, but probably more into like cycling and endurance sport from a personal perspective.
Okay, cool. I told you before that I already had 2 guests on the show from Firstbeat as well. One episode was with Joel Wenning and one with Christoph Rottensteiner. And in those episodes, we talked a lot about heart rate variability, training load, and how to manage stress and recovery. And in today's episode, I would like to go a little bit deeper into that topics I already talked about with my 2 amazing guests. And we came up with the idea to talk a little bit about the movement efficiency, and would like to start off with like a rather more direct question, maybe also a little deeper question. When coaches, doesn't now matter if it's soccer or ice hockey or something else, hear the term movement efficiency, they often think, or in what I can tell, is that they often think about the biomechanics. Does it mean something broader than just to focus on the biomechanics, or is it, how would you define that? Let's start there, maybe.
Yeah. So I think for sure biomechanics is going to be a part of it, but from the angle we're approaching it, it's more looking at how much movement or activity you get relative to the cost of that activity. So kind of more looking at energy efficiency in a way rather than the biomechanics specifically. So if the underlying kind of theory or concept that we've gone with, or that we believe, is that the fitter cardiovascularly someone is, then the more they can move, or the more work they can do relative to like their internal response. So you can kind of think of it similar to like how your car runs, for example. People will often, when they're buying a new car, will look at fuel efficiency. So the further it can go for the fuel that you're burning. And it's kind of the same basic idea. The more you can do for the amount of fuel that you're burning, or burning less for the same amount of work. And so it kind of gives, we believe, like an indication into the sort of the cardiovascular fitness of an individual. Kind of gives it a bit of a window into that and an idea of their current status.
Mm-hmm. The example with the car efficiency is a really, really good one, because I'm a little bit more interested in why let's say you have two athletes in front of you, why could they move at the same speed or lift the same weights, do the same activity, but have different heart rates?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it is going to come down to their cardiovascular fitness, their endurance. Obviously, the way they move will be a bit of it. Like if all else was equal and one just had a slightly better movement pattern, then they would probably burn less energy for the same work that they're completing.
Mm-hmm.
So as a variable, it's not going to be exclusively internal cost to external movement, but that's kind of the fundamental sort of foundation of it. And yeah, kind of when you dive down into individual differences, everyone has slightly different makeups in their physiology, whether that's different proportions in muscle fiber types, whether they're more sort of type 1, type 2, so more explosive or more endurance based. Obviously their biomechanics are going to be a factor. Someone who's taller, particularly when there's like lots of change of direction and stuff, may find that more demanding than someone who's perhaps a bit more compact and has a lower center of gravity. That's probably something you'd see a lot in hockey, I guess. Like someone who's really tall and kind of gangly isn't going to be kind of as easy, will find it as easy to change direction as someone who's kind of a bit shorter and a bit more compact in how they can move. But yeah, so yeah, it seems to be very much a foundational piece of how efficient someone is in terms of the internal cost of their activities.
Okay. Do you think, or what's your take on if I throw two words into the mix, the maybe a little bit more into, but the capacities you can have or you do have as an athlete, let's say, in terms of cardiovascular system,
Mm-hmm.
does it mean that the higher you have the more capacities you have, the more performance can you bring, or is it there's more into it?
Yeah, I think that will depend on how we're defining performance. If we're talking purely physical output, then for sure someone who has greater capacity, all else being equal, will be able to kind of do more. But obviously there's then lots of other factors that come into play, particularly in skill-based team sports rather than just physical-based, kind of more athletic sports. Motivation is always going to be a significant factor. So like if someone doesn't have the kind of psychological drive to do it, then that will also kind of impact how much output they have physically. But yeah, there's kind of lots that comes into it. But definitely, you would say generally someone who is physically or has more capacity in terms of their physical performance is going to be able to do more. And then that kind of has the knock-on effect that if they're able to meet the physical demands more comfortably, then they're probably going to be able to meet the technical and tactical demands better as well, because they're not so tired, so they're able to think clearer and kind of process things quickly. They're not purely focusing on kind of trying to keep up physically as well. So it's all interlinked. Like as you, I'm sure you know from your own experience, you can never completely isolate different things. They all kind of, one influences the other. But so it's never quite a clear-cut case of yes and no, but normally if one is better, then the other will be too.
When you would have to choose between focusing on let's say, increasing? You told me before, or when we started, that you did a lot of long endurance running in your past. When you think about an athlete in that case, or if you only think about yourself, or if you would talk to me and I would be not struggling, but I want to improve a little bit. Speaking of moving efficiently, would you think, or would you give me the advice to work on my um, movement to make it more efficient, or would you rather give me like the idea of, hey, if you want to have more performance, or if you want to not performance, if you want to run longer without getting fatigued, if you want to run a bit faster for my current standard of distance I'm running, where should the main focus be? Should it be a mix of both? Obviously, probably ideal, but is there any, for you as an expert in this case, is there any ratio that you could try to aim at?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd have a fixed ratio in mind. Yeah, I think it would kind of depend on where you were and what your start point was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, particularly with running, I think the quickest initial gain is from trying to like improve the movement patterns a little bit. You can get quite fast changes in kind of your stride pattern and stuff from doing appropriate running drills. And that then has the knock-on effect of allowing you to run for longer, run a bit faster, because you've sort of taken some of the inefficiencies out of just the biomechanics that we spoke about. Um, so yeah, the endurance running, I guess, is quite different probably to team sport again, because you just kind of that constant same movement. You're not
Mm-hmm.
really having the same kind of decision making elements or change in direction and that side of it, or the kind of the explosive elements as much if you're kind of purely looking at endurance based sport. So yeah, I think in summary, my first thought would be look at the movement patterns, kind of get someone doing like this kind of part of their warm up before they go running, do some like running drills, some movement drills, try and teach them to kind of run properly. And then that allows then you can then build up the kind of the physical demands on top of that. So it kind of be a multi start that again, multi pronged approach. So you kind of go at it from both angles.
Okay. Would your answer change if you would talk to me when I was 16, 14? Because I'm still in the process of learning those movement patterns and be
Mm.
able to really work on running efficiently, or playing efficiently in a sport. Where I'm aiming at is, do you treat, or do you talk to about those topics the same to junior athletes, to kids growing up into evolving into that sport, the same way as
Mm.
you talk to adults and professionals who might be 30, 35, close to 40? Is it still possible to make the same efficiency gains also in this, when you get older, professional
Yeah.
sports, senior level?
That's a good question. I don't necessarily have a kind of firm answer for that one. But I think, yeah, if you're working with young athletes, then it makes the movement patterns all the more important, because you're kind of then setting them up for a long term career, for want of a
Mm-hmm.
better phrase, of doing their sport. Whereas potentially at like those young ages, if they've got kind of faults in how they move, or there's areas that can be improved, it's going to be difficult for them to really then take those next steps. And then, as with anything, the earlier you can teach something, the better they'll be long
Mm-hmm.
term, I think. So yeah, you'd definitely look at trying to really ingrain those good movement patterns early, because then it just allows you to add that bit more on. Obviously, you have to factor in that they're still growing, still developing physically, but I suppose there's more capacity to learn, and they're in less of a habit of doing certain things. So when if you're dealing with maybe a masters athlete for the first time who's perhaps never had any kind of formal training, I suppose, in or formal teaching in maybe how they run or how they move, they've got a lifetime of maybe slightly bad habits that they're already very used to, so it becomes much harder to then try and change that. Whereas if you do it when they're younger, it
Yeah.
makes the job so much easier, I think.
I was curious with that because I'm here in my club since 4 years and mainly working with the first team, the pro team. And we have players who joined with me and who are still with me. And when we do, let's say, regular warm ups, so we go sprinting, we go into the gym, they sometimes have just problems with the right technique or also the right movement in this case for the sprints, for example. I noticed that the most there, and I don't find a certain way into making them more efficient while sprinting, but they are all like 32 to 35, 36, and I don't. At the end of the day, now I'm trying to don't to change their running technique, so just to make them run faster or to keep them running at the same speed in this case. And when I compare it with my youth teams I sometimes work with together off the ice, I can see the big differences because they can really adapt to the things what I'm trying to say, and they're still in this learning process. And yeah, I think it's an interesting comparison. They do the same sport, but it's completely different approach you need to find.
Yeah, and I guess when once they've sort of reached that established senior pro kind of level where they are maybe in their 30s with you, that it's perhaps more toward the end of their career by that point. So I think the focus moves from developing them athletically to almost more just keeping them going rather than trying to change anything significant. Because particularly if they have got to that point without injury or without significant injuries, then you kind of do you risk changing
Exactly.
something when like a sort of if it's not broke, don't fix it approach, but equally look into what small wins can we potentially make without taking significant risks with that kind of player's health. So it's again a fine balancing act, isn't it? Like, and ultimately for you, running isn't your primary activity. Obviously, being on the ice and skating is, and it's like, is it worth trying to change too much when maybe it would help a little bit with their running off ice, but is that then going to directly translate to what they do on ice? I suppose is a tricky question to answer.
And the other thing is that they know that they won't be the fastest with 36, 37, and it's more about them. For me, it's more about maintaining their level of fitness to keep up and for them to do more maybe sometimes than the younger guys, because they just need more time to recover and more time to maintain their bodies. So interesting concept when you have those 18 to almost 40-year-olds in one group, and then you compare it with the purely junior teams, and they're all still, okay, it's wrong when I say still teachable, because everyone is teachable, but you can really see them evolving over a couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. Like I say, it can be quite a challenge when you've got such a wide range of ages and stages of career all in the same group as well. But it's definitely, I think you can for sure see the difference between like younger and older pros. And I guess you just have to adapt and treat them as they need to be treated as individuals, and like see what works for them, what kind of gets the best out of them on the ice for you guys.
Yeah, definitely. Graham, to switch it up a little bit, I this time actually only have one word for you, and it's at the SMFT. You shared that with me. Can you? I know it already, what it means. Can you share it to my audience as well? Maybe bring out a definition, define it, or tell me something what it is and how you can measure that.
Yeah, so SMFT is abbreviation for submaximal fitness testing. Um, so yeah, it's kind of, as a concept, it's been around for a while now. But the idea is basically that you do fitness test protocols with players, or with athletes, I should say, but it's not pushing them to their absolute maximum,
Mm-hmm.
and you're still able to get usable, kind of worthwhile results from these protocols that don't take them to the very limit. I guess historically, and perhaps maybe still, like the gold standard of things like VO2 max testing, for example, have always been maximal um, incremental tests. So it might be in a lab on a treadmill, continually increasing the intensity till failure. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously, when you're then in team sport, trying to do that for any athlete is challenging, because when do you find the time to do it? And more importantly, when can you repeat that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know going back 10, 15 years, you'd have lots of teams might go and take their players to universities to do lab tests at the start of pre-season. But then that gives you a picture of where they are at that particular point in time. But then, are you repeating that test at any other point in the season? Probably not, because you're
Mm-hmm.
pushing your players to maximum. So you can't do that in season, because when they're going to recover from it, like if you're pushing them to the absolute max, that's going to add some significant recovery demands. And yeah, so it kind of then makes you, I suppose it makes you question what's the point of doing this when we can't repeat it? Because generally, fitness testing is something you want to repeat at regular intervals to see what the changes have been in performance, or yeah, have they improved? Have they got worse? Are they still the same? So yeah, so the kind of the idea of submaximal testing is it doesn't have the same recovery demands as a maximal test, because you're not being pushed to maximal.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, like the commonly recommendations are that the athletes maybe only get to sort of 75 to 80% of their heart rate max, which isn't very much, really. And the kind of the speeds that transfers to, if you're doing a running based protocol, is fairly comfortable for any athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I think somewhere between sort of 12 and 14 kilometers an hour, which isn't much. It's a reasonably comfortable jog. And yeah, so what that then allows you to do is you have relatively short protocols, like often, again, maybe only 4 minutes. So it's really easy for people to kind of integrate that into their normal training sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And it can almost be done as like part of a warm up. So yeah, once a week, once every 2 weeks or something, or even once a month, depending on, again, what the head coach will allow. You can easily just use like the first 4 minutes of a training session, run the submaximal protocol, and then you can get from that, you can take, or you would take the athlete's average heart rate for a period within that test. So typically it would be the last 60 seconds of that test. And you look at their average heart rate for that 60-second period at the end of the test. And then from that, you can see with reasonable degree of reliability, has their cardiovascular fitness changed? So has it improved? Has it got worse? So the higher the heart rate response, the less fit they are,
Mm-hmm.
because their heart is having to work harder relative to the work they've done. So the protocols will always be identical. So kind of taking that variability out, and then it's just looking purely at the heart rate response. And that's sort of then, yeah, where what we've already spoken about with the movement efficiency, it's the same kind of idea. You know what the workload is. It's just this 4-minute running protocol. And then the cost of that is the heart rate response. So the higher the cost, the less fit they are, the lower the cost, the fitter they are. And the research kind of backs that up. So submaximal testing, like there's been quite a lot of research done on over the last few years. And yeah, typically submaximal test results kind of correlate quite well with maximal tests. So it gives you a field-based option that you can run repeatedly at regular intervals to kind of get insights into the current status of your athletes.
Okay. So if I understand that correctly, it's purely a running protocol, or is there any way, obviously now for me interesting, to find a way or find a test to do on the ice?
Mm. Yeah, it doesn't have to be running. It can be anything really that suits your sport.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I suppose most of the sports I work with are land-based, so running-based. Obviously, hockey is the exception to that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it can be anything that suits what you need. So it could be if you could come up with a skating shuttle where they're just going blue line to blue line or red line to red line. Can't remember which way around they are off the top of my head. That lasts about 4 minutes and yeah, gets you the sort of into the rough area of, like I said, 75 to 80% of heart rate max. Then yeah, you can absolutely use an ice-based one. Some will use like cycling-based ones, so stationary bikes, watt bikes, that kind of thing. Again, where you have a fixed workload. So it might be 4 minutes at a certain power output, for example. As long as the protocol itself is always consistent, then you can kind of use whatever you want. If it's about the right intensity, then it works. Like, you still get that same internal response. Obviously, the closer you can get it to how you would move around in your main sport, it's probably worthwhile. So yeah, for running based stuff, it makes sense to do a running based protocol for you. If you can do an ice
Sure.
based one, then great. I know there are hockey teams out there who use bike based ones because it's a bit easier to control and you've not got the
Mm-hmm.
gliding element and that side of it. So it's them kind of taking away that sort of movement that you can have on the ice where you're not putting in any effort.
Yeah.
But yeah, really the protocol itself doesn't matter too much as long as it's kind of consistent. And that's also part of the beauty of submaximal testing is you can choose whatever works for you in your setting and the facilities that you've got. So it's quite flexible in that regard.
Yeah. That's a good point, because it's not only just for me, but I think also there might be a listener maybe in that same scenario as I am. But obviously, you know it as well, working so long as a sports scientist and for different teams, you might not always have the best case setup in your club. Maybe you don't
Mm,
have enough bikes. Maybe you don't have somewhere to run or to work out. So sounds perfectly that it is that flexible and obviously also repeatable, and you
mm,
don't set them under that much of a huge fatigue that you don't have to rest them for a couple of days during a training week. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it can literally just be the markings that you've got on your pitch or court or training area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the recovery demand is obviously a big bit of it. Like I mentioned earlier, if you do a maximal test, that's really it's really unpleasant to do. Requires complete motivation to actually push yourself to the maximum. And then even if you get someone who can and is willing to do that, you've then got significant recovery demands at the end that are gonna disrupt and impact your training in the coming days.
Mm-hmm. Have you probably done the test before a couple of times with some athletes, I would assume. Is it possible to see as an outsider if we go back to the efficiency of the running in this case, that efficiency under fatigue does drastically change also for good or elite runners, or is it
Yeah.
for everyone the same? Or
Yeah, I think it does change as you get more fatigue. So just from like some of the small scale internal research we've done at Firstbeat, we've got like cases where if you track it over the duration of a marathon or something, as someone becomes more fatigued, their movement becomes less efficient. So yeah, in our platform we use variable called TRIMP, which is your training impulse. So that's like
Mhm.
your internal quantification of your internal training load. And then we use a variable called movement load, which is accelerometer derived, and that basically captures all of the movement that the athlete is doing. So as the the marathon progressed, even though kind of the internal response was staying fairly stable, the external response was going up. So the movement load was going up, I guess, because or where the individual was becoming more fatigued, they weren't moving quite as well, so they were kind of more impact through each stride. Because their muscles were fatiguing, they weren't able to absorb and shock as much and that kind of thing. So it shows that as you fatigue, the ratio changes. And then with some, again, some small sort of studies we did using soccer data, you could see that on longer sessions, individuals' movement load would be lower on average than shorter sessions, and likewise more intense ones. The ratio would be slightly lower relative to easier sessions. So obviously the full mechanics and reasons behind that, it's not 100% clear cut that it's purely fatigue based. But the indications are certainly there that as an athlete fatigues, their movement efficiency ratio decreases.
Okay.
Which makes sense, I think. But
yeah, it does. Do you think that in future the sub maximum fitness test will replace, like you mentioned, the gold standard in VO2 max, or is it like specific for running or specific for certain sports that it will, or they will both like coexist and you test it in different times of the year? Or is it one or another in the future in your thought process?
Yeah, I think they'll always both exist. Again, it depends very much on the sport and the context. I think for team sports, submaximal testing is pretty common now, and it allows you to see those changes without the sort of invasive maximal testing. I think it's not super important, I don't think, on a day-to-day basis to necessarily know, particularly like in soccer or hockey, what someone's VO2 max is, because it's not, obviously it is a significant component of their performance, but it's not kind of really having a huge impact. Whereas like an elite runner, it's obviously a lot more relevant because it's a significant part of like their physiological makeup that contributes to their performance in that event. So sort of in endurance-based sports, it's still useful and beneficial to have an understanding of like where their physiological parameters actually are. Whereas in team-based stuff, where you're maybe working with 25, 30 athletes, it's more just knowing it. Are they changing positively or negatively, rather than specifically what that value is? Because again, you're working with far more individuals rather than an endurance sport where you might only be working with a handful of people. So I think they'll always coexist. One won't replace the other because they're functionally different and are used for kind of different things, really.
Okay. Before we wrap it up, I would like to ask you two more questions, also to sum up what we talked about a little bit, and also to maybe give or hear from you like a practical takeaway to the topics we just discussed. And first one being regarding the sub maximum fitness test again. What is, or is there maybe also for new coaches, or let's take me for example, if I do the test after we talked with each other now and I want to try it out, what's like the biggest mistake what I could do which I shouldn't do while doing a submax test?
I think it's potentially quite easy to make it a bit too hard by making the running speed or whatever activity you're going for. The demands can be a bit too hard. I think it's probably in a way surprising how low the intensity is or needs to be to get the desired sort of level of response from the athlete. So like in for a running based protocol, it can be quite easy to kind of make them run a bit too far or a bit too fast on each shuttle. But that also maybe just requires a little bit of trial and error. So yeah, work with your group, be prepared that maybe if you do the protocol once, you might need to adjust it a little bit the second or third time you do it to kind of get them more to the level of response that you want. So yeah, that's probably the easiest mistake to make. And maybe kind of stressing too much about the details. Like it doesn't matter if they run at, or the protocol you set is at 12.5 or 12.7 kilometers an hour. Like those finer details really don't matter too much. Just find something that works in your space that's not too intense, but also obviously not too easy, because you need to get a sufficient amount of stress to kind of get a worthwhile result. But yeah, that would probably be the main thing, and then just be consistent. Like once you've kind of got that protocol nailed, don't change it, just stick with it. Keep repeating it as often as you realistically can. And maybe don't try and make decisions too quickly, because it can take a while to kind of start to see what's normal. As with anything, some individuals will naturally have more variation between tests than others. So one individual, a 5 beat per minute in their heart rate response might be kind of within their normal variance, whereas there might be someone else who's super consistent, and that could be like double their normal variation. So kind of you need to collect a bit of data and kind of build a picture of what's normal for each person before you can really start to think, do we make changes off the back of this data?
Okay. Which heart rate zones, speaking of Firstbeat also, could you aim for doing the test? Or other way around, one more thing, sorry to interrupt you. Is it suitable to do it with the whole 25 squad roster?
Yeah.
Because they are in these different groups or different heart rate zones? Or should you split them into those groups when you know them for a bit longer?
Yeah. I think it depends, again, on the type of athletes you've got. So I suppose within like normal team sports, like, there's going to be like positional differences and differences across the group. But I think they're all kind of close enough to one another in the bigger scheme of things that you can run them all at once. So you can do your whole group of 2025. And that's why, like within the guidelines of the test, there's kind of a window of roughly what your heart rate max should be at the end. So I think it might be 70 to 80 or 75 to 85. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But most people will probably fall within that. If there's one or two outliers above it or below it, again, it's probably not worth stressing over. It's one of those details that you can get kind of too caught up in trying to, kind of group people and stuff. But the whole point is that it's supposed to be kept simple and easy to run. If you've got then 2 or 3 groups who have slightly different speeds or distances that you're trying to get them to do, it becomes more too complicated almost for the purpose. Obviously something like American football could be quite different because there are such large variations in body type and athlete type across that. But that's probably more the exception when you look at hockey. And obviously defensemen and forwards will have different kind of different builds and physiques, but they're not going to have the same variation that an NFL team would. So yeah, I think you can generally do it with the whole group as one for convenience.
Okay, sounds good. When people want to learn more about what we just discussed together, or to learn more about other things you're doing at the moment, where can they find you? Where can they contact you?
So obviously they can find me through my own work contact details. So get in touch with us via Firstbeat, or I am on LinkedIn, Instagram, however they want to get in touch, like email. I don't know if you'll maybe put email addresses in captions at the end when we're done. But yeah, I'm more than happy for people to kind of reach out and try and help if they have any questions.
For me, it was a pleasure talking to you, because I learned a lot new things today, and I will 100% try the testing out next season. We are sadly, for that regard, in a right before in front of us is the playoffs. So end of the season is coming close. So might not start it right now, but good thing to do it maybe next season. And on my end, I just want to say thank you for joining me today. Like I said, it was a pleasure talking to you. I learned a lot, and you shared some amazing insights to me and to my listeners. And
likewise, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a pleasure, and hopefully we can talk in the future again.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you so much, Graham. I wish you a happy, nice day, and talk to you soon.
Yeah,
Bye.
cheers. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow the podcast, leave a rating or comment, and share it with someone who loves sports science. And for more content, follow me on Instagram at science_in_sports_. See you in the next episode.